I'll do a crappy job twice in the same night. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. Awesome. Cool. Tonight, part 4 of the Complete Combatants, The Quest. We are joined by Brian Hill and a couple other participants from the Quest. We're going to be talking about all things related to the Quest, the most redundant introduction in firearms podcasting. Be sure to check out the other great firearms podcast on the Firearms Radio Network, firearmsradio.tv. Before we get into this episode, Shelly, I want you to talk about how you named the Quest, what does it mean, and when do tickets for the Quest 2023 go on sale?
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. It was a couple of years ago that I kind of had this in my brain to do something specific to the, pistol optics, red dot, and started, talking to a friend of ours, Scott, of Modern Samurai Project. He was on board. So we just it was born in 30 minutes, and we had named it because we knew we wanted something journey-ish. So we got the dictionary and thesaurus and started putting in things. And all of a sudden I looked at it and I went, how do you like the Quest? And Brian and Jedi went, that's it. So it was named. Then we were like, well, who do we want our first special guest to be? And threw a couple names out. We all went, Tim Herron. That was it. 5 minutes later, he was on the phone. That's it. And then I started thinking about how I wanted the introduction to be when we did our first Quest, and what I would like our final statements to be when we are closing on Sunday evening. And this is what I read. So thank you so much for asking me. The definition of the word quest: it's usually a long and adventurous journey searching for something that is difficult to find or achieve. The Quest's definition of success is to spend 3 days on the range, combining performance and technology with one goal in mind, resulting in a higher level of proficiency. So I opened with that and closed with that, and certainly hope we didn't miss the mark, and that was something that was accomplished over those 3 days. As far as ticket sales opening up for the alumni of the previous year meeting this year, so the alumni of the 2022 The Quest, they'll be able to register on October 30th between 5 p.m. and 6 a.m. the next day. At 6 a.m. on October 31st, and that is of this year, is when it goes public, and that means anybody can register. So that's what we have going on. You would just go to the Complete Combatant, and you will see next to the schedule of 2023, which is October 6th, 7th, and 8th. When registration is open, the link will be there, and it would be Eventbrite. So as far as the public goes, set your alarms, because it sold out a year early for this one, or a year early. It sold out a year in advance for this one. So hopefully we'll have the same amount of energy for 2023.
Yeah, I'd imagine that you would have quite a bit more energy and excitement going into it, because I've heard nothing but great things about the Quest. With that, are you going to limit it to the same 35, 36 students, or are you looking at, okay, perfect.
Nope. Awesome. Nope. We want to keep it, we want to know your name. We want it to be people's cheers. We want it to be a close-knit group, and anybody that comes and is alumni is absolutely welcome, and they're automatically considered alumni of all of our training. So everybody gives them discounts and so on and so forth. So we want to keep it close. So we'll keep it at our range, and it'll be just two or three lines, and it'd probably be 36 to 38 people, and that's it.
Awesome. So it sounds like there'll probably be like 5 or 6 seats open to the public. If just talking about how much everybody loved it this year and looking forward to it next year. So.
We'll see. Well, I hope so. I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed putting it on. So thank you so much for having me and allowing me to come in and give that information. You guys have an absolutely excellent night and enjoy yourselves.
Awesome. Thank you for
Shelley
jumping
does
back on
also
with us.
accept brides.
I do accept brides. I do. Absolutely. Yeah.
You want to get in?
Mama's got a yard to build.
Yep. Let's go.
Bye, guys.
Have a good one.
Good night.
Awesome. All right. So kicking it off, Brian, talk to us a little bit about you. And I was talking to Andy about you last week. And as we were talking about the class and everything, and talk about your journey in the training industry, how long you've been doing it, and what do you attribute to your overnight success?
Cheryl Curl once won the award for best newcomer, and she's like, I've been playing in Vegas for 30 years, so I kind of can feel like that overnight success. I started teaching when I was a teenager in martial arts, and that was in 1986 that I started teaching. I've been training in all things martial since then. I've fought as an amateur and professional fighter in most venues of kickboxing and grappling and MMA. And my whole life has been teaching students and teaching clients to be better and to find their performance level. I did a brief stint in the Fulton County Sheriff's Office Reserve, and I've had multiple other jobs in security and stuff like that. But primarily, I've been a private sector coach my whole life. About 11 years ago, my wife looked at me and she said I was getting a little old for fighting, which is what every man wants to hear. And I decided I needed something to do still, so I was going to get back into shooting full time. And I apprenticed with a company for 4 years, and then I practiced nonstop during that. And I'm known as the performance guru that gets people to practice better and perform at a higher level now.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I jokingly said overnight success because it's I mean, for years you've been doing it, a lifetime of doing it, and that's everybody's like, oh man, it's just overnight success, and it's like, yeah, overnight success, 30 years in the making. Josh, introduce yourself to our listeners. Talk to us a little bit about your training background and what made the quest something that you wanted to participate in.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh Harris is one of the students at the quest. What drew me to it was a weekend with, as Scott put it, like-minded Americans, and you have 3 of the best instructors across the United States. So how could you not do it? I've been shooting for, like, I say competitively, loosely, for 3 or 4 years, and I was like, if you have such talent in one location, how as a shooter and looking to get better and more proficient, how can I not sign up and invest in myself in this?
Love it. What about you, Mike? A little bit about yourself, your training in the background.
Right now, it looks like I'm a floating head. This background in here. I'm just Joe Average. I own and operate a couple of grocery stores. And in 2018, I took my first pistol class. The class was, hey, bullets go in here, they come out here. Don't mess us up. Don't mess us up. It'll be a good day. My next class was with Sherman House at Fusion MMA in September of 2019. Then I took another pistol class from Brian in November of 19. And I've had just loaded the class schedule since then. I've had a class with Scott. In fact, I think Josh was in that same class. I had another class with Scott at the beginning of this year while he was still hobbling around after surgery. So I got to experience AJ as the kind of primary, even though he was the AI. So y'all can all be jealous of that. AJ's awesome. We'll get into that later anyway, but that's really my background. Just about 4 years roughly of training.
Nice. And then Getty, for the folks that weren't with us the last hour, introduce yourself to our listeners and talk to us about your training background.
Absolutely. So my name is Getty, and I'm going to recycle the same introduction that I give on my show and everywhere else, but I'm the bald guy who teaches people to shoot guns for a living. I've been a firearm instructor since 2011. I started shooting competition pretty quickly after that. Started with IDPA and then branched into USPSA, where I got to have more fun. And then met Brian and really got wrapped up with, him and Fusion MMA and shooting with him. The best that I can find from pictures was 2015, 2016, but I think it may have gone before then. And ever since then, they just can't get rid of me. I'm the piece of tissue stuck to their shoes. So I'm just trying to absorb as much as I can. Currently, I'm the performance pistol instructor at Georgia Firing Line, where I run our media program, and I'm also a manager up there.
Awesome. Brian, I want to talk to the Quest specifically and what your role, what was your day of instruction focused on, and why was it performed? Or you were the self-defense, right? So you married the performance, the competition side of it. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I apparently am the martial monk amongst the crew, so I get the self-defense side, and that's where I spent most of my time. I did about 7 years of a force-on-force experiment where we taught class once a month with different martial artists, incorporating entangled weapons fighting, legal aftermath, and doing all that. So we learned a lot about self-defense. And as a martial arts instructor, I've always been really interested in that side of it. The way that Red Dots changes self-defense is that our vision now can be where it should be, is on the target. Human beings are not prone to look at a front sight. And when we read officer-involved shootings, we see over and over that they did not see anything. Maybe it was unconsciously competent. If a bear charges out of the woods, you're probably going to look at the bear, and that's the nature of the human mind. So I'm an amateur neuroscience in this field, and what we really did was work on how people see, how they can predict their vision, how they can react and correct it in quarters of seconds, and how they can shoot in a deliberate manner and understand what the ramifications are. We did some tool cycling. We did some pepper spray work, because I think every self-defense person should carry some pepper spray, because you need a less than lethal option. And we worked cycling through that. We gave verbal commands, and then we did some shooting in and around things that we shouldn't hit, like other folks. They were all cardboard and downrange. I didn't put any people down there, but that's we worked self-defense the whole time. We worked vision. We worked contextual processing and cognitive stacking.
I love that. So, Mike, I want to get the students' perspective on what the first half of that day with Brian looked like. What were some of the drills that you were running, and what are some challenges that you had?
Challenges. Nice. Let's start with grip for a challenge. And what is that word, Brian? Is it foveal cone? What is this?
Foveal cone. Foveal.
Hey, I'm in the ballpark anyway.
A little different end of the body.
Yeah. Brian came by several times and said that I needed to expand my vision. And I know you're going to hear a lot, or you have heard a lot, about Brian's language and all these big words that he uses, but you understand him. It's not intimidating. I don't want anybody to think that. So he uses big words, but you get it. For me, grip, ADHD is a lot of fun out there. I'm saying that with the utmost sarcasm. Let's see. Brian, Tim, Scott, AJ all told me modulate, see more visual patience. So those are my things. That was not just the first half of the first day. That was the entire day, the entire weekend.
So I want to be able to talk better, talk correctly, speak well. Brian, I might have to take a class with you on that. That's one of the things that Tim had talked a little bit about in that class, or during our episode, and your language and how you speak. And I think it came off as there are a couple sides to that coin, right? I think there are folks that do it to try to sound intelligent and at some point elevate themselves. But everything that I've seen from you, from the instruction that you put out on YouTube, the conversations that I've had with Andy and Tim, specifically regarding the Quest and the training that you did out there, it kind of leads me to believe that it's the opposite of that. It's just it goes to demonstrate the level of expertise and knowledge that you've gained through the years with martial arts and neuroscience. And can you talk to us a little bit about how you take that top level knowledge and you dumb it down for Joe Schmo gun owner?
Yeah, whatever we do in training is explorative, speculative, and experimental. And we're trying to improve the way we do this. And I found a real opening when I came into the firearms industry that there wasn't a lot of modern coaching methodology being used. This stuff has been around. As coaches, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I'm a MMA coach. I'm an official cornerman for the state of Georgia. We've been using science to improve people for a long time. And what I've encountered, and no offense to the firearms industry, was martial arts before the first UFC match. A lot of preference over principle. A lot of people saying, I like to do this way, but they're unable to really explore the aspect of the human being. And my language is a virus. It infects people with ideas. So I try to paint a picture as I work through their mind. And my real gift is managing physiological stress and psychological inputs, because we find with athletes, a lot of technical training will help for a while because it creates novelty. But what we really have to do is interfere and preempt with the sensation that makes them make bad decisions. And then we have to learn to manage the arousal level, which always gets a smile from everybody, but that's the psychological term for it. Are you excited? Are you too excited? Are you underexcited? And then as a coach, my job is to make sure they clearly understand the goals when they step to the line, that they're fully present, that they get immediate feedback, and just as important, that they stretch more than they're comfortable. If they're a hard charger, they need a lot of stretch. If they're a little timid, they need a little stretch. But that's how we cement learning. And those are the 4 factors that I try to make sure in every class happens as I step to the line and as I speak to people. And what I found as a coach, it's my job to meet you, not your job to come to me. And so Mike and I have both fought. So I talk a lot about fighting with him because he's got a vast knowledge. So we can hang this information off of it, where Getty has a great background in martial arts and shooting. It allows us to communicate quickly, and we find transitive knowledge, which is sideways knowledge, and we pull it in because every client is good at something in their life. And if we can take that expertise and shift it into a new field, it cuts the learning process down much quicker. And we get over platitudes and inputs that don't change the client. And the client, this is a fairly simple activity, shooting. It's compressed by time. That's the hard part of it. And what we have to do is make sure we address the client technically, psychologically, and physiologically and improve them. And that's what my message has been. And that's how I try to do it. And that's how I try to paint things with words. And I practice this quite a bit. I film myself, and coaching is my specialty, not shooting.
Josh, talk to me a little bit about the gear that you used. I don't want to segue off of that, but I do want to talk a little bit about gear because I think people are interested in what folks were shooting out there, especially with Red Dots gaining the overnight success, right? Because they've only been used for the last 3 decades, but all of a sudden this new technology, Red Dots. So talk to us about the dot that you used, the gun that you ran it on, all that good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Getty also said that he's kind of a gear nerd himself, so he might get a kick out of this too. Primary gun ran was a G45 MOS, topped with an RMR Type 2, 3 1/4 MOA dot. Let's see. The first 2 days I ran a TRX Arms sidecar from Appendix, focusing on self-defense aspect, and Scott kind of specializes in that AIWB area. So for Tim's class, I switched to outside the waistband, ran competition, more outside the waistband battle belt setup. Surefire X300 Light, agency comp, agency threaded barrel, because Gucci Glocks are still cool.
Getty, same question to you, man. What gear did you run? What dot were you running?
So I am very partial to the Trijicon SRO. I prefer looking through a car windshield instead of a toothpaste tube. And over the past year and a half, I've made the switch from the Wonder Glock platform, the Gucci Glock platform. And I dabbled with the M&P for a little bit. I dabbled with a couple other different guns, but ultimately I landed where I should have gone to begin with. That's a 2011. When I made the switch to the Staccato, I can do more with less effort. And it was kind of funny because I think it was like a month after I got the gun, I was able to tack Brian down for a private lesson. And the video's up on his YouTube channel, but he got me to unlock a chamber in my brain that I didn't think I had. And I can confidently shoot that gun to the speed of my sight. So if I can see it, I can hit it. open up my peripheral vision and I can harness that now. And, being able to push that along to students and everything, but having a way to dictate why that is kind of the power in it. But, so yeah, I'm shooting a staccato P, with Trijicon SRO, and I keep it in a, tier 1, Axis Elite. And that was before I got to know Scott.
Awesome. Mike, I want to get your input on the gear.
Well, my direction is probably a little different than the other guys. I don't compete. I have shot some steel challenge, but I don't consider myself a competitor. So I went in this with the idea that I'm working on me for self-defense. And Tim had a great line. He said, I don't care what type of shooting it is. Shooting, whether you're shooting for fun, for targets, for defense. If I can teach you to shoot more gooder, you're just going to shoot more gooder. And he's right. So I went in with the idea of self-defense. I was wearing a Filster Pro and a Filster Enigma with a Franken PDP with a Steiner MPS on it.
Brian, kind of along the same line with the gear chat discussion, what were some of the guns that you saw on the line, and were there did any students bring anything that kind of gave you pause, like, we might have some issues with that? And what gun did you see the most of?
10 years ago, everything was a Glock, and now it's not like that. People have a lot of choices. We saw a lot of different things on the line. The only optic that is truly the bane of my existence is the Sig Romeo Zero, because it's just not a quality optic. It doesn't make it through class. But people that are running Steiners and they're running aim points and Trijicon and Holosun, all those optics are running fantastic. Seeing a real resurgence of 1911s again. I just taught again this weekend. One guy had 4 1911s with him, and Atlases and Nighthawks, all of them. So his gun case cost more than my car. And but that's what we're seeing in classes. We're seeing a resurgence of people exploring, Beretta 92s because Ernest Langdon's doing a great job with them. 1911s because Staccato has tapped the market that $2,500 for a pistol is not unreasonable. People want quality aspects of that, and they want to be able to move it. And then there's the rest of us that just kind of take our guns and turn them into what we want them to be. But we all end up at the same price point, it looks like, by the time we get done. And optics are really doing well now. They're performing. I keep count of this, and I have a 16 to 19 ratio right now. 16 optics failed, 19 iron sights failed in my class so far. And what I mean by that, they're out of place or they disappear. And the iron sight issue is still a problem. So for us, it's iron sights and a red dot always. And that was part of the quest, is how can we flesh this out and make it a part of the world.
Hey, Brian, did you notice any red dots go down over the 3 days of quest? Because I didn't, and I kind of try to watch that stuff. We were talking about it in the previous episode there with Shelly, and I took a course here. Jeremy took the same course a couple years ago, and that instructor's still not really sold yet, I think, on red dots. And I personally was super impressed by the amount of red dots we had out there. Did you notice any failures or anything that stuck out to you?
AJ is really the one that had to work with all that. I know we had a couple batteries go down, which is not uncommon because, people don't change their batteries beforehand, or they use something like an Energizer. We know Energizer batteries tend to go concave on top of them, lose contact with it. So please use Duracells. That's probably the number one thing we see. And then the other problem just in general is not using a torque wrench to appropriately attach the optic, and using witness marks to notice when it's starting to do. So there's kind of a learning process of maintenance, that we didn't have with iron sights, although we used to, because we used to have adjustable iron sights. So we had to zero them each time we went out, and then we went away from that. So kind of seeing the same thing with red dots. It's a high level entry fee, but it's getting better and better now with Holosun's new one that co-witnesses with your stock factory sights. We're moving into that place where optics are just going to be in every pistol. I used to say welcome to the future. Now I say just welcome to the present. And if you're shooting irons, you're probably Amish.
I mentioned to another national level instructor that I foresee red dots going to every law enforcement in the United States, and he actually disagreed with me, and I'd like to go back and ask him that question because I'm seeing it more and more. We had a couple of law enforcement agents there, or law enforcement officers, I should say, there in class, and they had red dots, and I think one of them said that they run red dots just about throughout their police force. So that was kind of cool. I wanted to move over into something that you mentioned. I hope this was you because I have it at the top of my list. And it says here, classes should have a definition of success. Was that you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we do.
So tell me about that a little bit more. Expand on Quest 2022, your block. What was your definition of success, and did you obtain that goal?
So it was very interesting to be the self-defense instructor at a performance group, and what I really took away from it, that the change that the red dot brings is the ability to be target focused, which causes some visual problems for people, especially people who've been shooting iron sights for a long time. So that was a tremendous help for me. So my definition of success was allow them to access their perception. And we have to be careful about it because perception is different than vision. Our minds are primitive by nature. They're a patchwork of technology, biological technology, and they don't actually see reality. They perceive what they want to. So people that don't want red dots to work will perceive that they're too hard to shoot. They're not easy to find. And the same perception is people who want to shoot incredibly fast, like we were talking about Getty opening up that process. As soon as he relaxed his eyes and went to the focus that's natural for combat, which is the open vision, the panorama vision, then he was able to shoot much faster because you can track motion. And one of the things as a self-defense instructor that needs to be talked about is our sights are never still, never have been. They're movers. We're always shooting a mover, and that's what a red dot is. And it's simple because, as Aaron Cowan said, the target is your front sight, the red dot is your rear sight. And the definition of success was to stay on track with getting people to see what the dot can provide predictively and reactively. And then the quintessential skill is being able to stack skills that are both cognitive and contextual. And that's what we really can't train on the range. So I did some interesting drills that stretched people a little bit, made them think a little differently. And then we were trying to develop that unconscious competence and vision.
Yeah, real quick, I want to step back to the battery thing. Thank you for answering the question that I haven't got the answer to about the Energizer deal. I've seen it a lot on Facebook. A lot of guys are like, don't use Energizer batteries. And I'm like, why? So you answered my question. So thanks for that. The other thing that you did really well, obviously I was a student there too. So one thing I really liked was a couple things that you mentioned, and I just want to share my notes with you. You mentioned a lot about the accuracy guys versus the speed guys. And I've always been a guy that wants to go fast, but I needed to be accurate first. So now I'm stuck kind of in that accuracy spot. I can shoot pretty good. Now I need to go faster. And so that kind of unlocked a little bit thought process for me. Of course, working with Tim too about stepping outside my comfort zone. And so I really like that. That's one thing that stuck with me. The other thing is always be present. I even kind of stole that on day 3. It was day 3, 1 hour before end of quest. And my kind of group was everybody's like, man, I'm spent. My sponge is full. I'm tired. My feet hurt. And I said, hey guys, what did Brian say on day 1? Be present. We have 1 hour left. Let's all be present. And they were like, yeah. So it was kind of cool to use your own words that I learned on the very first day. So I wanted to share that. But I want to turn it over to Getty and ask you, Getty, since he unlocked that special thing in your brain, what was it?
I mean, for me, it was at least the way that I absorbed it was to let my eyes do what they do naturally. When we roll jiu-jitsu, there's a level of relaxation that's there. Because if you're, super tense and, you're very sporadic in your movements, you're easy to read. And I've had people ask me this question before because Brian was my jiu-jitsu coach for, several years. And to this day, he's the best coach I've ever had. The question has come up before, what's it like to roll with Brian? And the best answer I can think is that I'm drowning, because you make a movement towards what you think is, the surface, and you're just getting, snuck by another shark or something. But for the relaxation, that was the way that I was able to contextualize it for me was, let my eyes see, open my vision up. I don't have to get sucked in the glass because I've got this big old window. I can look right through it. My eyes go where I want the dot to appear. Because to kind of borrow from Jedi, the dot goes where you're looking. That's the good and bad thing. So if I'm focused and I'm in my task and I'm paying attention, if I'm present, right? That was really the summary of what I took away from that. And I teach it to other people now. So, so it's kind of wild.
In that same vein, Josh, what was the most challenging part for you? And then what was the biggest takeaway that you had from Brian's segment?
Oh man, Brian's talked to me about this before, but my biggest thing is just the confidence in like my performance. It's like he's like, dude, your speed's there. Stop trying to be fast. You are fast. You just got to work through it. Kind of like Eddie said, just see what the dot's going to be there for. Let it happen. Don't make it happen. And then we worked on grip, like kind of like Mike said, dude, grip. I've been shooting for years for pistol, and I never thought, in a decade of shooting pistol that I'd have to change my grip. Yet here we are. And that's what I've been working in dry fire for the last, 2 weeks since it's gone down. So just trying to get rid of the old stuff, bring in the new, and rewrite the hardware up top. So,
Brian, with 36 students on the range, what process and how do you go about identifying what is going to be the thing or a couple things that's going to give each one of those students the most bang for their buck and show them the greatest improvement? Can you talk to us a little bit about how your brain keys into some of those things?
Yeah, I start from the moment I see people. I observe their posture. I watch their gait. I listen to the words that they use because that shows me the style that they like to learn from. It also tells me a lot about their personality. And what I do is I've got a part of my head that's really developed for this that allows me to store a lot of information about people. I also interview them. They don't recognize it, but I ask them how they're doing and what they're excited about, and what they love to do in life, because that tells me what they're good at. And then I can make a predictive diagnostic just by watching people move, usually of how they're going to shoot, because posture really dictates that. And then all I have to do is see them move once or twice. And if you're a good coach, you can pick up on the at least speculate what you think is wrong. And I always ask people questions. I'm not a technical guy that just says, hey, quit slapping the trigger, grip the gun harder. I ask them what they feel, what they see, and how they interrelate with that. And, a lot of times when you ask, especially somebody in class, what did they see? They all smile and they said, I didn't see anything, which is a huge problem, And then the guys that see really well, like Josh and Getty, are really fast shooters. They see really well, but sometimes they don't feel very well, and the feeling sensation's even faster, and seeing it creates a self-image of, as I draw the gun, I know that I am ahead of it, and then I can simply correct or shoot when I need to. So it's every person can be met on their own terms if the coach will simply pay attention at a high level from the moment that they meet them and practice their diagnostic skills and ask questions that are appropriate and find what the client is good at, and then become their advocate for success. Because that's what good coaches do. They advocate for your success. So I don't let them shake their head and yell at themselves. They correct without emotion, and they celebrate like Vikings when they do well. And that's what changes people in the long run. And it feels like a gift to people, but it is 40 years of hard fought information to figure out how people work.
Mike, can I just cut in on that real quick?
Yeah.
I'm the opposite of the other two guys he's talking about there. Ricky Bobby's going to go fast, baby. I don't send it. I've got to have more visual patience. And I heard that all weekend. So I'm going home. I'm dry firing. I'm like, no, hold on. Let's get this right. Visual patience. So I'm the opposite of those guys, but Brian dialed that in as well. So I guess what I'm pointing at is his ability to coach, that you keep hearing about. Well, I'm 180 degrees from those guys. I'm going fast. He's trying to not slow me down, but make me do it correctly.
And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said that you've trained with Brian before?
Yeah, several times. It doesn't take but one time and you'll be back.
Awesome. How do you think, how did the Quest, his one-day block in the Quest, and with him as an AI for the other instructors, how do you think that compared to some of the other courses that you took with Brian?
It was really interesting because of the juxtaposition with the other courses that were there at the time. Typically, when you go into a class, you're looking for one specific thing. You're looking in one vein. And we had 3 different coaches, and you really didn't know what to expect, which really worked out because you were getting a lot of the same thing, just told slightly different, which was nice. But I guess to compare Brian's one-day class with the other classes, this was more of a survey. This was, look, I can show you all of these things. If you want it, I've got classes for this. I can make you better in this. Brian mentioned it before. He read me in the parking lot, just like he said. And the first class with Brian, talking about being a fighter, I've got a handful of fights. I'm not good at it. Wasn't good at it. Anyhow, Brian says, look, you're trying to put too much power in it. The gun is a force multiplier. Stop throwing crosses. Give me a jab. And all of a sudden, my mind was like, wow, this makes a lot of sense. I can just be quick. I don't have to be power. I can be quick. And from then on, whenever Brian talks, Mike listens.
Thank you, Mike.
No joke. I got to tell this too. I'm going to cut in again. The biggest takeaway this weekend for me was gratitude. No joke. Thank you, Brian. And that's not piggybacking on any of that. It's meant a lot to me. The week going forward, I focus that in my personal life. More gratitude. And I really appreciate that.
Nice. Love to hear that. We had a Chris Barrett. He's talking about, he posted a comment here. The firearm training industry is plagued with myths, rhymes, and bad habits. I found that these instructors, and Brian specifically, challenged the status quo and a lot of the dated training strategies being used. So let's expand on that a little bit, Brian. What were some of, did any of these students, I'd imagine that a good handful of them, most would consider to be high-level shooters, with the exception of Andy. I've seen that guy on the range. No, just playing.
Not wrong.
Yeah, all joking aside, Andy is a great shooter, right? But higher level shooters. But were there any issues that you had to kind of work out of some of the folks to get them kind of up to speed and where where the lessons that you've learned through training and teaching and coaching folks and kind of shortcut them to that path?
Also, Andy.
All right. So one of the big problems on the range is people think yelling and being negative makes them better. Despite all evidence to the contrary, the voices that live in your head are ultimately negative, and they tell you that you suck. One of the biggest things we have to reroute is you can make corrections, but they have to be done without emotion. So you say, listen, I didn't see the sights. I didn't see the trigger. That's one of the biggest things I start working on. Then, as Mike alluded to, is gratitude. Your brain rewires every time you express gratitude. So this is a learning principle. I did a better job. I'm grateful I had the chance to do it. Rewires the way you think about it instead of I got lucky, or I really don't know what I'm doing, or I'm going to forget about this, or I need a new gun. The other things that I really have to work with is there's a weird thing where people decide they could choose either speed or accuracy in a gunfight. Any fighter knows you can't do that. If you went to a boxing gym and the guy said, listen, I know you're getting killed, but I want you to slow down and get your jabs in, you would get hit 3 times and leave the gym because the feedback is immediate. The problem is, and we kind of alluded to this, is we learn to be safe first, then we learn to be accurate, but the next step is to be efficient. And the problem is most training goes to safety and accuracy first. And the reward is, well, I hit the target. It took me a day to do it, but I did hit the target. And the truth of the matter is, like Getty was talking about with his vision, is you don't have to be, and Mike saying visual patience, you can actually shoot faster, more accurately if you simply relax your vision. So it's a real hard, different way to think about things. But Miyamoto Musashi wrote about it in the Book of Five Rings, the soft gaze. There's a guy who had endless duels, 60 some odd duels. And what he said is never look directly at the opponent. Same thing for us. How do we open up our vision? How do we practice correction? And how can we get clients to get better sooner? Because they're more than technique. They have to be addressed is why do they continue to make bad decisions? They've learned how to press a trigger. They've learned how to grip a gun, but they can't stop doing the bad decisions. So we have to interfere with that sensation. And then physiologically, we have to teach them to feel what tone is, which is different than tension or relaxation. It's maximum efficiency with minimum effort.
Let's expand on that from the student's perspective. What sounds like you've been shooting for a while, but have there been any preconceived notions or training scars or ingrained habits that you've had to work through over the years? And how do you think that process helped you be successful or less successful during the quest?
So that's for me.
No, sorry, that was for Getty. I apologize.
Yeah,
Oh.
no name.
I mean, as far as bad habits, name them. I mean, I took my first professional firearms class in 2011 from a guy who was the instructor at the range that I now have his job. And it was one of those things where, it was all, hard frontside focus, and coming from the dot, that's hard to break, I mean, especially from shooting competitively, and then it got to a point where even in that competition world, when, you look around and, you're in the top 5 of any match you go to, we're not looking at the front sight. Everybody's target focus anyway, but nobody admits it, because we all teach front side focus. And so now, it not only is it okay, it's the right thing to do, because that's how your eyes work, and that was that was just the first thing. And then, of course, everybody harps on recoil management. And I've got a coworker of mine that we go back and forth on, like arm placement for extension and shoulders up and down. And then, coming off of, a class with Brian, I came back and I said, I got your answer, and here's why, and then we worked through it. And, we looked at the physiological side of, how do you create a better structure so you don't have to work as hard? So those are the first two that I can really think of, is breaking that front side focus, and then, grip and extension, and just getting my body in a position to do what it does, as opposed to trying to force it to do things.
I'm going to go back to Brian on that front sight focus. I want you to expand on that a little bit, if you don't mind. Obviously, we're not going to teach your whole course here in our class, but I want to talk about that. So I was talking to kind of a high-level instructor here in New Mexico, and I was telling him about that. I said, man, we don't teach that front sight focus anymore. I just kind of say, look at the front sight through the rear sight centered on your target. And he's like, man, I got to expand on that some more. So share a little bit, Brian. Tell us about that lack of, why are we still teaching front sight focus when it's not necessary?
It really goes back to a coach's beginner's habit. If I'm going to teach you to shoot iron sights, I have to get you to look at something. So I'm going to tell you to look at the front sight. Now, we've all taught a class, and we told people look at the front sight, and then they don't align it in the rear window or on the target, and they say, well, I saw the front sight. It's an incomplete thing. We call it the rule of 3. We're telling people to do something that is inherently not natural for their vision, and is very difficult to do because it has 3 different objects to see and try to align. But it's a beginner's methodology. So what does the intermediate student learn? Well, he should learn that sometimes the back of the gun is enough to frame it up if the target's large enough, or he needs to see the front edge of the front sight at 25 yards because it's going to include most of the target. And then for the advanced shooter, what we can tell them is you never need to see the front sight clearly in the first place. As long as it's in alignment, nobody cares if you see it well. And one of the big drawbacks to red dots was it was expensive to get into it. Yet I see people wearing eyeglasses that are $500 or $600 that are not focused on their front sight. So they're actually a real implement or problem with that. And then if you do have shooting glasses, you don't wear them all the time. So we have these issues, and we know vision works different than we thought we did, but all we had was iron sights. Well, now we got both. So the red dot allows us to teach that the target focus is okay. And if you think about managing bad guys, man, you have to be looking at him and his hands. You can't be looking at the front sight, but that was the input first. In my force on force image-based decisional drill classes, there's a part where you shoot unexpectedly several times. I have yet to find a shooter that saw their front sight during that aspect because they locked on the target. And that's how our vision works. So we're teaching something that even though we wanted it to be right, the brain says, I can't do that because it can't see 2 things well at once.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Tim talks about driving because he's a familiar or former race car driver, right?
Yeah.
And I was driving to Socorro, New Mexico for a range day over the weekend, and it was pouring on the way over there. And it kind of hit me. And so it's just funny that Mike mentioned this about bringing it in your personal life and stuff. I was driving, I see the windshield, you see the rain hitting the windshield, but you're not staring at any of that stuff. You're just staring at the road way ahead of you, right? And I was like, there's kind of that aha moment of like, oh, okay, yeah, now I get it. So, Mike, did you start out with red dots, or did you come on to irons, and how did you transition over to those 2 things, since you're somewhat of the starter, I guess
New
I
guy.
would say, right? That too.
I started with irons like everybody else. You know, I'm the been around guns all my life, hunted all my life guy, right? And then I had a good friend tell me I was an idiot. I didn't know what I didn't know, and boy, was he ever right. Um, so I made the transition to red dots. Actually, the first time I shot with one with any instruction was in Scott's class, with Josh. And being the wizard I was, I had an orange front sight, front post on that gun with a red dot. And man, let me tell you, that was a lot of fun trying to figure that out. No, I'm not focused. I'm front sight. I'm not focused. That was the whole thing. So it has been a lot of fun making that transition, and I do not want to go back. These peepers are not working at the level that irons worked for me. So even with a dot, I have some astigmatism. Different ones work a little better, and that's individual based. Mine will be different than yours, but I've gotten a lot of help with the dot from Brian as well as Jedi. I took Brian's 2-day class as well.
Brian, when we're looking at the quest, and we were talking to Shelly in the last episode about setting this up and how it's a joint deal with the Complete Combatant and Modern Samurai project. Why the heck did you want to share a weekend with a couple other instructors, and then why Jedi? Why Jedi is the one to partner up with this and to bring on a third guest instructor?
That's a pretty simple answer. The only thing that matters is that we all get better. It doesn't matter whose name's on it. Doesn't matter what else is said or who invented what. What matters is as instructors we get better. And Scott is a good friend of mine, a dear friend of mine, but also he cares about making his clients better. And he teaches it like a jiu-jitsu class where there's a connection. I go to a lot of other people's classes, and Scott was the only one that came out and greeted me like a friend. I'd never met him before, but he made a connection to me right away, and he cared about my shooting. For the three of us to get together, Tim and Scott and myself, and to share information back and forth, and then everybody who helped us is also an instructor. What we're going to do is create a better, stronger group that's modulated towards performance. We are all healthy enough to disagree occasionally with each other, and then we go and explore it and experiment and see if any of it works. And that's where we're at. And that's where it's really been at. The best shooters have been teaching the tier 1 groups, and they've been teaching HRT with the FBI. It is the guys that are free like myself, that not beholden to any organization. They don't have any institutional bias, that can explore and see what are the best practices that we can. And then Scott's going to teach 100 classes this year. I'm about 50. I think Tim's probably at the same place. We're seeing a tremendous amount of information that we can pass on to each other and share with our clients. So why would I not do it is the answer. If I wasn't an instructor at this, I'd be taking this class, because to get 3 people's or 4 with AJ on the line, and I think AJ is probably one of the better instructors in the United States. If I had private lesson money to go spend time with him, that's what I would do, because he's such an insightful guy and he relates well. So what a great chance for us to grow as instructors and to help our clients grow and to create something that's more important than somebody's name. The quest is simply what it is. We're looking for high-level performance, and we have no idea what's possible with pistols yet. We're just on the cutting edge of this. Appendix has changed everything. Red dots have changed everything. We're seeing national averages of bill drills that was 2 seconds, which was something spectacular. In my own classes, I've seen 160, 170 bill drills with complete control performed in front of me by average Joe guys that do other things for a living, run grocery stores and have regular jobs. And it's the same thing in MMA. We get this pool of knowledge and we share it, and we all get better, and we pressure test it, and it stays alive, and it doesn't become a dead doctrine that somebody did something so long ago that we no longer know why they did it. Now we have real expertise coming out of it. So I was really excited to do it. I think Scott's, he's the cutting edge of red dots, and he's, he entered the industry, and he's done a fantastic job. And then Tim is a national champion and a high level shooter, and a guy who's passionate to help his clients. So we all have the same thing in common. we want you guys to get better sooner so you don't have to struggle like we did.
You know, it's funny you mentioned you don't want it to become a dead doctrine. And I think if we look at what the industry has done in the last 4 years, even 2, 3, 4 years, how prior to that, it kind of, if we look back on it, there was a lot of dead doctrine being regurgitated around out there. And then over the last, I mean, you probably have a better insight than this. And Getty, you've been instructing for, 10, 11 years, right? So it's would you guys agree with me on that? It feels like in the last 5 years, we're really the industry is really shaken up, and it dispelled a lot of that crap. And I think it's because of a lot of the overnight success that we're seeing with Brian and with Tim and Jedi and AJ, right? It's going to be funny. Next year people are going to be talking about AJ. Oh my God, overnight success. And it's like, no, man, this guy has been working with people for years and honing this craft and figuring out and what's going on and really figuring out how to teach people and coach them and make them better. Josh, talk to us a little bit about what you saw from other students on the range, specifically when you weren't shooting, right? When you were in the second relay, and the other relay was up there shooting. What did you witness from the instructors and the AIs on the range? When Brian was working with Scott and Tim, and then with those guys when they were working with Brian.
A lot of it was like getting rid of tension. I know I have a lot of problems with like making sure my shoulders are kind of tense because I can force the gun to do something. And minimum 3 times, Brian came by and was like, "Hey man, relax your shoulders." And then it seemed like I was like, okay, I was starting to look around and it seemed to be the common denominator was at least 75% of the people on the line were just tense. Shoulders were raised up and they were just like turtling behind the gun. And they were like, "Hey, it's not going to make you faster. Just relax your shoulders, bring the gun up to your eye. Everything else will take care of the rest. Just shoot what you see." And believe it or not, it works.
Is the turtle stance, is that now part of the dead doctrine that we're moving past?
Golly, I hope so. Oh man, I hope so.
Awesome.
Like trigger reset.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Bingo. Or slow is smooth.
Oh God. Tim will lose his mind. Don't say the whole thing.
Yeah.
Somewhere
I think
Tim's
that's-
out there punching air right now.
Yeah, that is definitely his trigger. One of them. Mike, what percentage of students would you say kind of fell into your realm where it's self-defense? Was it competitive shooters? And then we had a student in there, or we had not a student, but a listener ask, the quest sounds impressive. Were there students with worn out knees, wrist, or other worn out body parts getting by? So Mike, speak on that a little bit for us.
You picked a great one to speak on because all of mine's broke. We have to work around a lot of injuries where Mike thought his body was more durable than it was, and he tried to push it to places it shouldn't have gone. So yes. Now let me back up and answer the first part of that. As far as how the class was broken down, what percentage was what? If I had to give Kentucky windage on that and a rough estimate, I would say between 20 and 30% of the people there were competitive shooters, and the rest were like me. You had some fairly new shooters that were safe, good to be on the line with. I can't say enough about the type of people who were there. There was no safety issue the entire time. I mean, guys like Getty behind me, Getty and Mike and Tam were behind us, watching everything, plus the eyes that we already had on us. So there was never any, you would think 36 people, 37 people, holy cow, there is no way that's comfortable. Honestly, it was. Can't believe I'm saying that, but it was. I guess the level of people, the quality of people, and everybody had their head on straight. So mostly self-defense minded people with their head on straight. We had women, we had older folks, and everybody worked through it great. So the injuries were not an issue.
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to go back to that safety thing and touch a little bit on it with Brian. Something you mentioned, every range that you're on, right? Safety is always paramount. We always talk about it. Muzzle discipline, absolutely paramount. We're going to make mistakes. And there were a couple mistakes out there that happened. Nothing unsafe, just kind of brain fart things, right? One thing that you touched on, though, that I found really interesting is you talked about trigger verification, that you may touch your trigger without even knowing it. And I kind of thought about that for Jeremy and I when we teach concealed carry, because I'd say at least half of our students, at very least, they're brand new students. Most of them are like, hey, I have this gun, show me how to shoot it kind of thing. So how did you come about seeing that trigger verification? Just through experience? Did you start tracking it? Because I know even during the class I think I saw 16 times someone touched the trigger when they weren't supposed to. So how'd you come about that?
But as an instructor, there's common problems all the time, and we know it really comes down to muzzle discipline and trigger control. And I had some, I've done some CQB work in my background too. So when I went to Force Science and took their course as an analyst, they talked about trigger verification syndrome, and what they were seeing was the SAS was doing it. Highly trained unit, elite with lots of combat experience. When they were going through shoot houses, they were still touching the trigger. And then I know as a human being that we have a thing that we do, we can't help it. When we get out of the car, we always pull our belts up and touch our guns. As a former law enforcement guy, that's a dead giveaway. And that's unconscious. It's not under our control. We're checking to see if the thing that may save our life or is important to us, just like our keys or our wallet, we pat to see if they're there. The same thing happens under stress. You pat the trigger to make sure the thing that can fire the gun is still there. And if it's not under our control, we all have to accept that we're all at risk. And frankly, I'm at more risk than most anybody because I spend 40 or 50 hours with guns every week. Maybe Getty gets a little bit more too in the gun shop, but it's an incredible risk for us. So once I tell the students that not only is it probable, it's going to happen, and that we all have to pay attention to it, it allows you some ability to get around it. The other thing is we went to a DASA for a while because we're afraid people are going to press triggers under stress. And one of the things that allowed to do is to see the hammer actually starting to move, which stops some officers from actually shooting before they should. We know this is a problem. It's going to happen. And the only way to do it is to address it head on, to make sure the safety rules follow that and that people can see themselves doing it. And instead of offering an excuse when they get caught, the best thing they can say is thank you, because they'll rewire themselves with gratitude. And I tell everybody, if you catch me doing it and you say, hey, coach, your finger's on the trigger, I'm going to say thank you too, because I know it's possible. I know it's probable, and it's going to happen. And once we accept that risk, then we can start mitigation of risk. But as long as we get in the car every day and drive and pretend that yellow paint keeps us safe, we can live in ignorance and bliss, but we're still in danger. And the same thing happens on the range. We're going to touch the triggers. It's one of the number one calls for instructors. Recognize it for what it is, point out the process to the person, and see if they can get some conscious competence involved in staying away from that. And if nothing else, emphasize muzzle discipline above all things.
So if in a performance-based course or a competitive shooting-based course, it's pretty clear cut what the end objective is going to be, right? It's going to be shoot accurately as fast as you can, right? Shoot as accurately as fast as you can. When we're looking at a self-defense course, and with you specifically, Brian, what are some things, what do you want the biggest take, or what are you trying to instill in your students in that self-defense course, in that self-defense block of instruction?
So we still have the same goal. We have to teach them to shoot as efficiently and as accurately and as disciplined and as consistent as possible relative to what is the stimulus. And for us, the stimulus is the size of the target. So if I'm shooting bad guys up close, or I have to make a headshot, or I have to make an ocular shot, those are different sized targets. And that's what tells me how fast I can go. The context is ever changing in self-defense. You could have a clear moment and it could go away from you. You could be in motion, the other person could be in motion. There could be something in the way and you can't see appropriately. What we want to do is get people unconsciously competent with the administrative part of drawing. Then their brain picks up as when I see the dot and it's appropriately inside of a target, I can press the trigger without it waiting to stay still. Because self-defense is no different than performance shooting. The size of the target dictates how quickly we see, how our hands stop, and how we press the trigger. The only thing that we're adding is some real rich context to it. And for that, we use, like John Korea's videos, active self-protection, to do some modeling. Instead of saying that guy's an idiot, think what you would see or do in that situation. So as a self-defense instructor, I try to interpret that information and constantly affirm it in my class. So we know that as a defensive shooter, you need to be able to draw the gun, get a first round hit first, and then be able to do follow-up shots on the same person or on multiple targets, and to assess and stop. That's a lot for a person to handle. So my curriculum always focuses on those three things, and I keep it present in my mind so I can constantly pressure people to work on the contextual and cognitive stack of that.
Did you include some of those task stacking drills that we've seen from you and the Complete Combatant? Did you include some of those drills in the quest?
Yeah, we did. We were sponsored by Palm, which makes great pepper spray, and I just believe everybody should do pepper spray. As a martial arts instructor, I wish we'd have effective pepper spray a long time ago. There are no non-lethal techniques in the world. If you punch somebody hard enough, you can kill them. If you choke somebody, you're rendering them unconscious. If you bend their joints, you are applying lethal force. So what we worked on in class is Palm sent us inert canisters to practice with, which is a big deal because they have to clean out the whole system to put the inert ingredients in there. And they sent one for everybody at the quest. So we got to work on deploying pepper spray and then cycling to a draw, or using a verbal skill, using an ask, tell, make, and then using pepper spray. And if it was efficient or not, did we draw the gun? And when we drew the gun, did we automatically shoot, depending on the threat or the level of input? I would say weapon, I'd say stick, I'd say knife, I'd say he's running away. So it gives them a chance to kind of work through this. And we know from the brain itself that if you visualize an experience, it is no different than actual experience. So if our training reflects these sort of visualizations and allows people to see when they should use force and when they should stop using force and when it's too soon and when it's too late, and how to use these different tools together, because you find it really hard, if you use something in your support hand, to drop it in a fight. We see it over and over in videos, guys holding on to coffee or their ticket books or their dry cleaners or their loved one or their child because they can't let go of it. So something we worked on in class: spray the pepper spray, give verbal commands, drop the pepper spray, draw to the gun, draw to a low ready so you don't shoot, or draw to a position and fire. Sometimes they just went away from it, and it gives the people to get a little bit of chance to get used to it. And then they create what's called a schema, a lens in their mind, so that when they have something and it's rather similar to this, recognition prime decision making says, well, I've been here before, I kind of know what to do. And most people's programming comes from TV, so they have no idea what to do.
Getty, I want to kick that over to you. How did the task stacking drills and during that block of instruction, what did you notice from that? Did your performance degrade? Did you see no degradation in performance? And from the student's perspective, is that something that you've been exposed to before?
Observing that particular drill might be my favorite thing because you get such a wide variety of responses. There's an example that really juts out in my mind where, somebody coming off of drilling efficiency, you've been dry firing your 0.8s and you're getting real good at it. Right. But then all you have to do is talk to the target, and that spicy 0.85 turns into a 1.5 because you get stuck in this, it's like you got Parkinson's for a minute, and then you're able to get to the gun. So getting kind of the cobwebs shook out of you is a valuable thing.
Talking about this task stacking, one of the things that we talk about often to students about being accountable for every round that you send out of your gun, especially in the Walmart parking lot, because everything bad happens at Walmart, right? But one of my favorite drills, those were two of my favorite drills. Yeah, right? So two of my favorite drills was using the palm spray because I'm not really familiar with it. As soon as I brought it and I showed it to my wife, it's already now in her purse, so I'm going to have to buy my own, which is awesome. I squirted already with the inert palm spray first time when I got home. But once we did that, I love that part. And then
Andy,
actually doing...
Real quick, sorry, family podcast, can't talk about squirting.
Oh, damn it. Wow. You went there.
But it's inert.
It is inert, right? Yeah. That happens when you get older. Anyway. We often tell students, see, now you got me completely flustered. We often tell students that be accountable for your rounds. And if you're not accurate and you're not having that balance of speed efficiency, you could send your round into somebody you don't intend. And so that was the actual first time that we did a drill to where we had to create angles of shooting a target, shooting our perp, and making sure that we had the correct angle, that we didn't shoot the person behind him, right? And I watched those drills because we had the squad 1 and squad 2, and just jumping off what Getty said, watching both of those drills, especially using the inert pepper spray, having to use verbal commands and dropping that to draw and fire, it was interesting to watch up and down the line to see some people did well, some people didn't, some people got in that like kind of stuck mode. And I'm going to use a lot of that into my own training to where I start developing a thought process of, this isn't just a square range. What are you going to actually do? What are the decisions you're actually going to make to be able to speak to somebody, maybe use pepper spray, maybe have to drop a cell phone, may have to draw your firearm, may have to shoot or not shoot. I mean, that complex stacking is something that I think is paramount for anybody who's going to carry a firearm for self-defense. So, I thought those task stacking drills was amazing. Brian, thank you.
Hey, use them as you want to, man. They're great drills. So,
Brian, it's almost like he's trying to sell image-based decision drills with all that.
I did get that
I mean,
feeling.
that is exactly what image-based
Yeah,
decision
it is.
drills is all about.
Yeah.
Wow.
100%.
Yeah.
So, Mike, coming into it with the self-defense background and approaching the 3-day quest from a self-defense mindset, talk to us about how Brian's block of instruction reinforced the training that you have already been done, or and the benefit that you received from it.
Absolutely. The reinforcement, I don't think I've had a class with Brian where we haven't drawn to a low ready to assess the target. It's the only instructor I've ever had that did that. Every class, we're going to have to evaluate whether I actually need to take that shot. So don't draw and snap the trigger. Get out of that habit. Get it out of your mouth, Mike. Get out of the habit of getting gun out and getting on the trigger as fast as possible.
Wait.
Get off the gas.
I got to stop you again. Jeremy said this is a family show. Don't be talking about stuff getting out of your mouth, dude.
Hey, come on, man.
Gotta have a little fun here, right?
That's right. I mean, we're all everybody's wearing black shirts, bald head, knuckle draggers. So you got to laugh at something.
And all of us
we're pretty boring otherwise.
All of us are 13-year-olds right inside,
That's right. Absolutely. Back to your question, though, definitely reinforce those things, but also open up some new things as far as the vision, much like what Getty was dealing with. I was taking too narrow a focus, and that is absolutely wrong for self-defense. You get lost in that tunnel vision, and you're going to have a hard time. So I guess add that to what I learned this weekend.
You had mentioned the image-based decision-making drills.
That's right.
And you alluded to Andy selling that class. Is that a specific course that you offer, Brian? And what is that based on?
So my wife is dyslexic, and so the written word is really tough on her. She didn't learn well, but she's a very bright woman. You guys have talked to her. She's very energetic and forward-thinking. So she came up with this idea that maybe we should have cards with images on them, and then we can practice our responses to them. Do we make a verbal response? Do we pepper spray it? Do we need to use force? Do we run away? Do we use something else in our repertoire, like a flashlight? So it's a great way for you to make your dry practice more interesting. It's a deck of cards that comes with some a fake phone and inert pepper spray and all that. You lay it out on it, you flip the card over, and then you practice either giving a verbal command or using your flashlight and saying who's there. The things that the arms person needs to get that they never get, but yet they work into the world's largest force on force experiment called life on a daily basis, is we need to be able to talk. And mostly what we'll do in our life is project skill by talking and keeping our hands up in a good position. We need to have a secondary defense with pepper spray. We need to carry a handheld flashlight because they're incredibly useful and they will do nothing but help your life. You need to develop your shooting skills so they're unconsciously competent, so your mind can be free to decide what's next and what will benefit you the most. Should I continue doing what I'm doing? Should I try something else? Is it time to leave? And that's what image-based decisional skills do in a nutshell. But it's hard because it's a new way to do things, and it doesn't fit with most people. They just don't understand what to do with it sometimes. But I think it is a great way for you to train and make your dry practice more interesting. And they're available on the CompleteCombatant.com.
Yeah.
Boom.
Love it. Wes, shout out to Wes. He said a huge takeaway for him was when Brian asked what his wife is going to do if he had to draw down on someone. Really made him realize the importance of making a family plan. Josh, talk to. Sorry, I don't know why I muted myself right there. Probably because I'm tired of hearing myself talk. So I'm sure everybody else is. But Josh, talk to us a little bit about the training, the conversations that were had around that discussion or that topic specifically in class.
Oh man, anytime Brian talks, I feel like I should have a notebook present so that way I can just jot it down. And I have had the mind to bring one here because I knew he was going to say some insightful stuff. But anytime you can have a plan going into something, you're always going to be proactive versus reactive. And so that's honestly what it's all about, is trying to get ahead of the situation and having something in place that it might not be the thing that you drilled, but kind of like what Brian said earlier, your brain has a pathway to what you've kind of seen this before. It's not the same, but it is similar. So just not going through the actions because we want to be present in it, but along that point.
Brian, a topic that I guess hadn't really crossed my mind until just now is, it was a self-defense focused course. Mike had mentioned about 20 to 30% of the students over the weekend were competitive from a competitive background. Were there any obstacles that the competitive shooters had, mental barricades, mental obstacles to kind of coming over to the self-defense side? Because, there's obviously two sides in the industry. There's the competitive shooters, and if you do anything competitive shooters do, like shoot fast and accurately, it'll get you killed in the streets. And nothing that the self-defense guys do translates over into the competitive world. So were there any hangups, or did you have to put any effort or energy into getting some of those competitive shooters to wake up to hey, you're also a real person in the real world. You might have to defend yourself with that gun you shoot every day.
So I'm a big fan of the Socratic method. I just simply ask people questions. I ask them if they carry, if it's a part of their life. I ask them what they're going to do when something happens. That creates the avenue for somebody to learn. I find competitive shooters really very easy to work with sometimes because they do most of the skills fairly well already. They shoot well, they draw well, they do reloads, they can shoot on the move. They're used to working through a game plan before they do it. And really all they have to do is change their context from having a competitive style rig to it. One area that's very different, though, for the tactical shooters, the use of cover, the way we approach something. But I just changed their methodology a little bit. Instead of they have to get alphas, if they start thinking that they're going to work their way into the target and that they can take a little more time, that works particularly well. But performance shooting is the same, whether you're a self-defender or whether you're a competitive guy. The same problems exist. The same solutions exist for both of us, and it's always been that way. The Timmies need to get together with the gamers, and you end up with hybrids like me and Scott and Tim, because Tim was a mechanic, Scott was a mortgage broker, and I'm an MMA coach. So we don't fit in either world, really. I may be more traditional than they are, but there's a lot to be learned from competition, and the really good shooters I know all compete. There's a lot to be learned from self-defense. We have to think about these in a contextually rich environment and do some modeling on it, how we're going to greet these things. And that makes sure that the shooting issue is a shooting issue and that we understand how we work. So I didn't find it particularly onerous. I just tell them, even if they don't care about carrying a gun, it's a stage. You're at an IDPA stage. It's a table start stage. They have to do that all the time. And I was like, you're going to get better at processing problems. So let me give you something completely new that you have to do. And they're like, I'm down with it. And before I know it, they get a free pepper spray, goes in the wife's purse, and they're in class with their wife because now they're both concerned about self-defense. And I call pepper spray the gateway self-defense drug for us because it gets people in class and it gets them talking. And I will never divide my camp between tactical or competitive. Everybody gets better. All we have to do is fine tune it a little bit.
Yeah, I'll jump on that a little bit, Brian. You guys, one other thing that you guys did really well on the quest is it wasn't just about shooting.
Mhm.
There was many discussions that went on. Gosh, there was a couple. So I videotaped just about everything, believe it or not, because I want to be able to go back, rewatch these videos and take notes again. But you guys talked at times 30, 45 minutes before we even fired a round down range. And I think you guys covered that pretty often in between each one of you about the difference between competition and self-defense and how there's not really that much of a difference. It's more of just like, I'm going to make you shoot more gooder. You know, we talked about that in during Quest. So I want to thank you guys for that. Brian, we could sit here and probably talk to you all night long, but at some point you're going to send me a Visa credit card request to start paying you by the hour. But we'd love to have you back on eventually down the road and talk about maybe another one of your courses and spend some more time, deep dive into some of these things that you teach. I Facebook stalked you for quite a while, learning all these things. I was super excited to work with you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, the amount of stuff that you did just on your day, everything you and Shelly put together for this 3 days. It was awesome. So I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you. That's my final thing. Mike, Josh, Getty, it was a pleasure working with you guys. It was amazing watching Getty work in the back, watching Josh and Mike. Brian always seemed to pick on Mike in those discussions and his thought processes and stuff. And it was really cool to see that there's that bond there with all of you. So thank you guys. That was awesome. That's all I got to say. We're going to give you your night back here because it's already pushing 11 o'clock for you.
Oh. Thank you guys. I enjoyed this immensely. I'd be glad to come back anytime. Josh, thanks for staying up, bro. I know you got a real job. Man. You got to work. Thank you, Mike. Getty, you stay up anyway.
I'm a night owl.
Thank you. Yeah, me too, man. Me too. But I really enjoyed this. It's been a great discussion, and what a professional way that you guys go about the process and making sure everybody's included and following up on this. I think it's really interesting, and I'm learning a lot from listening and watching you guys too.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Who's the guest instructor going to be next year?
AJ Zito.
Awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome. Looking forward to it. Appreciate everybody jumping on. Remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. Y'all stay safe, and we'll see you next week.